So, thank you so much for inviting me here today to discuss one of my very favorite directors, Alfred Hitchcock, and his connection to the place we live, Sonoma County. Hitchcock, of course, was born in London, England in 1899 and had great success there as a director, with movies like The 39 Steps and The Lady Vanishes. But he loved America, particularly California. Of course, in Los Angeles and Hollywood, that was where he lived and worked, there were the movie studios, including his very last studio of residence, Universal Studios, which is currently home of the Bates House from Psycho, and a stage show explaining certain cinematic tricks in Hitchcock's movies. Also in the Los Angeles area, Hitchcock's residence in Bel Air on Bellagio Road, and his church, the Church of the Good Shepherd on Santa Monica Boulevard. In Scotts Valley was his vacation home in the Santa Cruz Mountains, which he spent as much time as he could at. And Hitchcock also chose California for location shooting more than any other place. He took advantage of our landscape and our weather, and often shot portions of his films in Southern California, close to the movie studios there. For example, in Psycho, after Janet Leigh, as Marion Crane, steals the $40,000, she's driving away from Phoenix, and she passes a sign on the interstate pointing to Gorman, California. Or Bakersfield, where the crop duster sequence for North by Northwest was filmed. But Hitchcock truly loved Northern California. I think our weather here reminded him somewhat of his home in London, where the fog creeps in. So he went to Mission San Juan Bautista and filmed scenes for Vertigo. In San Francisco, he shot Vertigo in various locations, Fort Point, Union Square, Ernie's Restaurant, and so on. And he also filmed in San Francisco was Hitchcock's very final film, Family Plot, released in 1976, which was filmed at Grace Cathedral and Fairmont Hotel, among other San Francisco locations. But of particular interest to us today is Hitchcock's two films made in Sonoma County. Shadow of a Doubt, filmed in Santa Rosa in the summer of 1942, and The Birds, shot principally in Bodega and Bodega Bay, 20 years after Shadow of a Doubt, spring and summer of 1962. Now, I've read this so many places that I really believe that it's true. Shadow of a Doubt, it was Hitchcock's very favorite film of all the films that he made. And it was made after Hitchcock's move to America from England. Now, in 1939, Hitchcock had signed a contract with David O. Selznick. And in 1940, his first American film came out, Rebecca. This is also the only Hitchcock film to have received a Best Picture Academy Award. He followed Rebecca with Foreign Correspondent and Saboteur, and these are very good movies, but the American Hitchcock film did not emerge full-blown. Hitchcock lived in the United States for a few years and got to know his new country. And then in 1943, he released Shadow of a Doubt. This is the first American film that's the equal of Hitchcock's greatest British films. It contains what Hitchcock had learned so far at the Hollywood studios. Plus, it has continuity with his body of earlier work, the British films. Now, the genesis of Shadow of a Doubt is quite simple. In 1938, the novelist Gordon MacDonald and his wife Margaret were vacationing in California's High Sierra. They had car trouble in a little town called Hanford. And that's when Gordon got the idea for a story about a fugitive murderer who comes home to visit his family in a little town. And in fact, it got to a point where it got to be a joke in the MacDonald family. Uncle Charlie was spoken of as though he really existed. Fast forward 4 years, 1942, Margaret MacDonald, his wife, was then head of the story department for David Selznick. And Hitchcock told her he was looking for a story. Her husband Gordon suggested Uncle Charlie to Margaret, and soon a 6-page treatment was delivered to Hitchcock, which turned out to be rather different from the finished film. Now, Hitchcock was most anxious to avoid conventional small-town American scenes. He He did not want stock figures seen in so many films. He wanted his characters to be modern, to be influenced by movies and radio and jukeboxes and so on. He called it life in a small town lit by neon signs. But he did not want these things to date the film. That's a pretty good trick if you can pull it off. Now Hitchcock realized that this movie would stand or fall by how convincingly it portrayed small-town American folks. And so he offered a contract to Thornton Wilder to write the screenplay. Wilder, born in 1897, he died in 1975, was that very American playwright and novelist, the author of The Bridge of St. Louis, The Skin of Our Teeth, The Matchmaker, which of course was eventually made into the musical Below Dolly. But it was for Our Town that Wilder won the coveted Pulitzer Prize. Our Town may be the most frequently performed American play. It depicts everyday life in a pre-World War I New Hampshire village called Grover's Corners. Grover's Corners represents the center of creation in this play. Now Hitchcock called them sketchy episodes in the play, but they reaffirm simple values, and Wilder elevates them to cosmic proportions. Now we can look at the movie Shadow of a Doubt as a perverse mirror image of our town, where middle-class staircases and innocent garages become locations for murder attempts. Thornton Wilder arrived at the studio within days from New York and started to work on the screenplay at once. He worked in the mornings with Hitchcock, and then they would break for the sumptuous lunches, which were Hitchcock's weakness. In the afternoons, Wilder worked by himself. When the screenplay was almost complete, Wilder had to report to Army duty in Washington, D.C., and Hitchcock went with him on the train all the way to boot camp in Florida. You see how important this screenplay was in Hitchcock's eyes. By the time the train trip was over, the screenplay was for the most part complete. Sally Benson was then hired. She was the playwright who wrote Junior Miss, and her stories were also the basis for Vincent Minnelli's great movie, Meet Me in St. Louis. Benson added additional dialogue and some realistic touches. The screenplay then went to Alma Revel, Hitchcock's wife and collaborator, who polished the script and added Hitchcock touches. Well, the production of Shadow of a Doubt, quite unusual. Hitchcock normally preferred working in a studio because he had control there. He was accustomed to large budgets devoted to construction of sets for his movies. For example, Saboteur, the film he made before this, over $50,000 was spent for sets. But this was 1942, midway through the American entry into World War II, and the government's War Production Board placed a $5,000 ceiling on money spent on sets. Hitchcock's answer? To make the film, most of the film, on actual locations and keep studio sets to the minimum. Well, location filming at the time was quite unusual. And Hitchcock decided he would film the beginning scenes of the movie in New Jersey, but most of the story would be filmed in a real California town. Right away, Hanford was rejected, the place where Gordon MacDonald had gotten the idea for the story, and several other sites were checked out, but finally Santa Rosa was chosen. It was built around a central square, somewhat in a New England manner, and the city seemed like a Norman Rockwell painting come to life. The population of Santa Rosa in the summer of 1942 was about 13,000 words. Okay, well, I do have a few slides, pretty contemporary to the time of the movie. Here we're looking west on 4th Street toward Mendocino Avenue, the Empire Building, and the American Trust Company. This was taken I think we're...
There was two back one.
Okay, looking west, thank you. This is looking west on 4th Street toward Mendocino Avenue, the Empire Building, and the American Trust Company. This photo was taken in 1935. Now we're looking north down Mendocino Avenue from 4th Street with the Postal Union and Telegraph Office on the left side and local business sides on the right. Here is the courthouse and the Santa Rosa Redwood Highway Arch looking south down Mendocino Avenue from Ross Street. This was taken 1 year before the movie was made, 1941. And here is a movie premiere at the California Theater in 1937. This is where Shadow of a Doubt premiered. But I was trying to remember the other day when this theater was torn down. And as close as I can come is maybe 1978 or 79.
That's correct.
I was there, and a friend of mine got a couple seats, which he put in his home and used to watch movies from. Yes. Here is a map of Courthouse Square, and it is showing various locations. When you see that little, here's Rosenberg's department store. Here's the Till 2 bar that figures prominently in the film. The Bank of America building, the Hotel Santa Rosa, and the Occidental Hotel, the J.C. Penney building, and Rosenberg's department store is over there. So that is what the plan of Courthouse Square was in 1942. Now here is a wide-angle view, am I the right one? Yes, of Courthouse Square, looking east down 4th Street, taken 1 year before the film was made, 1941. And here, this is from the film, here is a police officer directing traffic with the Bank of America in the background. And you certainly know exactly where this was filmed. Now the house of Dr. C.M. Carlson and his family was chosen as the principal exterior setting for the movie. A white two-story frame house located at 904 McDonald Avenue. Now Hitchcock thought it was much too ostentatious for a bank clerk's home, but he was overruled. The house was properly weathered, attractive, and old-fashioned, and the family, in fact, was so excited that a movie crew was coming to film something there that they had the house all repainted, and Hitchcock had the crew go around and dirty it up again so that it would look lived in. So here on the top is the Newton house as it appears in the film. That's the name of the family, the Newton family that lives there in the movie. And on the bottom, a contemporary view of 904 McDonald Avenue. Now here is filming taking place in Santa Rosa at the Newton house. That's Hitchcock behind the camera right there. And here is Hume Cronin, one of the actors, and they're getting ready to make that shot. Here's Hitchcock with the producer, Jack Skirball, in front of the 904 McDonald Avenue home. And here is filming the rear staircase scene. And Hitchcock can be seen at, I'm sorry, going a little too, I want to do my laser. I think Hitchcock is over here, and Teresa Wright is standing there, and Joseph Cotton is there. Now, 904 McDonald Avenue does not have, nor has it ever had, a rear staircase. But it figures prominently in the film. Many important scenes take place there, and it was built on the lot, filmed in Hollywood. It's another piece of Hollywood magic. Now, I want to show you a clip from Shadow of a Doubt. And I just want to show you a very short part of this movie. Let me just say a word about the plot. This is about the two Charlies, Uncle Charlie and young Charlie, the 18-year-old who's just graduated from high school who's named after him. And young Charlie is getting antsy in Santa Rosa. Nothing ever happens, and so she sends a wire, but unbeknownst to her, Uncle Charlie is already on the way, and he is coming. So let's see if we can. Here are scenes of Santa Rosa. And let me get the sound on. And there's the policeman on the corner. And here we are at the 904 McDonald Avenue house. There are other locations that were used in Santa Rosa. And let me show you, here is Hitchcock checking out the Santa Rosa Town Square. Next to him is standing Thornton Wilder, who is the man who wrote the screenplay, or the bulk of the screenplay. Here's Hitchcock at the American Trust Company with some bankers. And that's Thornton Wilder on the left of the screen. Here's Hitchcock in front of the sheriff's office, having a little confab with the sheriff, with his famous profile. And here is Hitchcock at a Santa Rosa Chamber of Commerce meeting. Now, the Chamber of Commerce building itself was used as a casting office, and locals were used as extras, ministers, lawyers, and bankers were chosen. During shooting in downtown Santa Rosa, the main street was shut down for 3 days while they filmed, and Highway 101 was rerouted to avoid traffic noise. Now, here is young Charlie, played by Teresa Wright, with a view south down Mendocino Avenue with the courthouse and the storefronts in the background. And here on the top, young Charlie at the Mendocino Avenue intersection, and a sign for the Hotel Santa Rosa is, you can see it lit up a little bit up there that says Hotel Santa Rosa. And on the bottom, there are the two Charlies, Uncle Charlie and young Charlie, and there is the J.C. Penney Company building in the background. Now, here are the two Charlies, young Charlie and Uncle Charlie, hugging with the Lee Brothers building in the background. This is right near Railroad Depot. And on the bottom here, I'm sorry. On the bottom here is a contemporary view of the Lee Brothers building as it is today. Now here is the Tower Theater and Rosenberg's department store. And I think you can see those. Here's the Tower Theater. I think Rosenberg's is down there. And that's 4th Street looking west from East Street, taken in 1939. And then in this other picture here, what I'm pointing at, that's a contemporary view of the Barnes & Noble bookstore in the Rosenberg department store building. Now here we have the Santa Rosa Public Library. In this photo over here, this is from the film with young Charlie hurrying toward the Santa Rosa Public Library building. And then over here, this is a photo of the library in 1959. Now, this library is very important to the movie. Does anyone know when this was demolished? I don't know. I know it was torn down, but what a beautiful building. And Hitchcock uses it very well in the movie. In fact, let me see if I can show you another clip. Okay, now here is young Charlie. Hurrying through the streets of Santa Rosa. As she makes her way to the library, there's that same cop. He works day and night. But you see how much Hitchcock is using the city in this movie.
Just a moment, Charlie. What do you think I'm out here for?
I'm sorry, Mr. Poe.
All right, go ahead.
And there's the library. And the music is very exciting. The music is very exciting for a reason. Because we are watching her go to that library, rushing to that library to get there before it closes, because there's some vital piece of information she's going to find out about her uncle, and it is a very thrilling moment. Now, I think I need to, I'm sorry, I need to get back to the slideshow.
No.
I need to go back there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No, I have one.
No.
Oh, and then I can get there. Thank you. Okay. Oh, man. Well, is this too cumbersome if I intersperse with clips? Is that okay? Okay, because I'm not doing a very good job. I know I'm not, but still. Okay, thank you for being so understanding. So, also playing a large role in Shadow of a Doubt, besides the Courthouse Square and the Santa Rosa Public Library, is the depot at Railroad Square in Santa Rosa. This is two scenes, very important. First scene where Uncle Charlie arrives in town, and the second of those two scenes is when he leaves at the end of the movie. And for the shoot, Hitchcock had specially planted at the depot a fully grown oak tree. He said it was for, quote, some artistic light and shade, unquote. So here we have oh, that's back. See, I pick it up upside down. Here we have a little slide up here of Uncle Charlie's train arriving at Railroad Square. And down here, this is a contemporary view. We probably all know what that looks like, of Railroad Depot looking south towards San Francisco. Now, I'm going to try to show you another clip here. We're going to actually see. This is the arrival of Uncle Charlie's train coming into the station. And you see how prominently, we will in a moment, how it displays Santa Rosa at the railway station. See, Santa Rosa, right up there. Now, Hitchcock specifically wanted black smoke coming from that train to signify the arrival of evil in the town. Okay. Now, let me get back. Okay. Well, so far so good. It'll get better, I hope. Now, an abandoned church building was used in an abandoned church building in Santa Rosa was used in the film, the Methodist Episcopal Church South. Now, it was 1942. It was used as a soldiers' reception center, and I don't know whether you can make it. Oh no, I'm sorry. Make it out on there, but it says Soldiers Recreation Center right up there on the church. And Hitchcock picked this church to use because since it was not being used as a church, he figured he would not offend anyone. And that was the reason he picked that church. So this is Hitchcock in front of the Methodist Episcopal Church South. And here is a contemporary photo of the parking garage at 5th and Orchard, the former location of the Methodist Church Episcopal South. Now, there were two local people that were used in prominent roles in this movie. Two girls. The first, Estelle Jewell, 14 years old, not her, but 14 years old, plays young Charlie's friend, as Catherine is her name. And Estelle Jewell has a few lines in the movie, and she does very well. She looks great, you know, she's just fine. And she's a real Santa Rosa person. The other person that Hitchcock chose to be in the movie is this young lady here, Edna Mae Wanacott. 10 years old. She has a more important role in the movie. She plays young Charlie's sister. And her name is Anne, and she's a bookworm. When the movie first opens up and they get to Santa Rosa, she's there reading Ivanhoe, and throughout the movie, she talks about how wonderful everything is in books, and she says things like, I know it's true, I read it in a book. You know? And she does very well. Hitchcock personally coached her himself. I don't know whether he saw some kind of connection between them, but her father was a grocer, and Hitchcock's father was a greengrocer in England. He chose her himself. She was standing on 4th Street looking in the store of Smith's Shoes, and she was looking in the window, and he was across the street, and he walked across the street, and he said, excuse me, little girl, would you like to be in my movie? And she said, yes, sir. Now, there was a local girl who was not used. in the movie. A woman named Mrs. Gurdon brought her little girl Natasha to 904 McDonald Avenue every day while Hitchcock was filming there. And standing prominently and showing off her little girl who was dressed to the nines and all ready to get before the camera. She was ready to rock and roll. Hitchcock did not want her, though. Well, Mrs. Wanacott took her little girl, Edna May, to Hollywood, and they tried to build a career after they made Shadow of a Doubt with Hitchcock. But her career went nowhere. Mrs. Gurdon took little Natasha to Hollywood, and she changed her name to Natalie Wood. And you all know what happened. So I guess Hitchcock just had something in mind, and little Natasha Gurdon did not fit that image. So Shadow of a Doubt was filmed in 4 weeks of principal photography in Santa Rosa in the late summer of 1942. And then, of course, more work was done in the studio after that. But I wanted to read to you something that Teresa Wright said in connection with this film. In those days, locations were not used very much, and it was marvelous because you were in a real house in small rooms, she recalled recently, but making an important point about the ambience of the shoot. Mr. Hitchcock's wife, Alma, and his daughter, Patricia, were there, and Joe Cotton's wife, Patricia Medina. There was very much a family feeling. When you are on location, you're much closer to each other than you are in the studio, coming from your own home to work. All of that lent itself to this film. A lot depends on what goes on behind the scenes. And here we have Hitchcock and the entire crew that were in Santa Rosa, all gathered at the railroad depot. Joe Cotton is there, Hitchcock's in the middle, Teresa Wright, and Henry Travers, who plays her father, I think. But there they all are, gathered together for one picture of everybody at the railroad depot. I think what Teresa Wright had to say about Shadow of a Doubt does show up on the screen. I think that feeling of it being a family type of thing is exactly why Hitchcock counts it as his favorite film, because that feeling was there, and I think Teresa Wright hit that right on the head. Well, the other Hitchcock film, shot principally in Sonoma County, of course, is The Birds. And although many interior scenes were filmed in Southern California at Universal Studios in Universal City, the shooting locations in Northern California for The Birds, well, of course, the opening scene of The Birds was set in San Francisco, Union Square. And this is the scene that contains Hitchcock's cameo appearance, where he walks from the pet store, walking 2 dogs, Sealyham Terriers, and they are his own dogs, Jeffrey and Stanley. But most of the location work was done for The Birds in Sonoma County, in Bloomfield, in Bodega Bay, and in Valley Ford. Location filming in Sonoma County was done then in the spring and summer of 1962, just 20 years after Shadow of a Doubt was made in Santa Rosa. Now, before location filming began, Sonoma County was visited by Hitchcock, where he checked out the geography of the area. One thing that he wanted to particularly get correct was the site of Melanie Daniels' trip across the bay to Mitch's house, the Ron Taylor character. Now, during the trip, when he made this initial visit, Hitchcock had photos taken for the costume department of every inhabitant of Bodega Bay. Every man, woman, and child living in Bodega Bay was photographed so the cast's wardrobe would reflect real life. And Hitchcock did it, he said, to get the characters right. Now, I want to show you a clip from The Birds. Now, I want to show you just that I have to fast forward this a little bit till we get past the lovebirds. But she is, of course, taking these lovebirds to Mitch in Bodega Bay. And first she is... goes faster than this, so it's not quite so. No, we have to go. This isn't moving. Okay. Now, this is Melanie Daniels' trip up Highway 1, coming to Sonoma County. Now, the California State Highway Department denied Hitchcock permission to stop traffic on Highway 1. That's why we only have aerial shots of Highway 1. These ground-level driving footage shots were shot along the northern part of Bay Hill Road. So this is Bay Hill Road. But when you get the aerial shots, we're going. That's Highway 1. So here she is driving into this town of Bodega Bay. And there is the little town of Bodega Bay. Oh. Now, these are some maps of Bodega Bay and Bodega. I guess we sort of know where those places are, don't we? Here is an aerial view of Bodega looking east, 1960. And here's the aerial view of Bodega Bay north of the Tides Complex, 1960. Note that the area north of the Tides was the most densely populated part of Bodega Bay, contrary to the geography portrayed by Hitchcock, because he does a lot of, we'll talk about his geography in a moment or so. That's what it looked like. Now, the Tides Wharf Complex in 1962 consisted of the Tides Motel and the Tides Restaurant, just as you see here. Tides Restaurant was known as the Upper Tides. These two buildings situated along Highway 1. Also, there are lower buildings down along the bay, the cafe. Here's that. The cafe known as the Lower Tides, which had mostly snacks for fishermen. The fish market and bait store, the boat rental building, the gift store, and the wharf with the pier. So this is what that looked like then. And that's quite a change from the way it looks today. But I do want to show you another clip from the birds. And I think I can, maybe I can. I want to show you a little bit of Melanie's trip across Bodega Bay, because this was so important to Hitchcock.
Do you have a boat for Miss Daniels?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I just want to back this up a little bit to the 1950. Almost there. Now she's walking out on the pier, on the dock, by the Tides Restaurant.
Do you have a boat for Miss Daniels?
Yes, ma'am. It's the one right below.
That's Doodles Weaver. Getting the boat ready for it. And I wanted you to get a look at this wharf area, and also look how he uses the surrounding geography to such great advantage, putting her right in the middle of all of that gorgeous scenery. Pause this. Now, before filming started on the birds, the owner of the Tides, Mitch Zankich, cut a deal with Hitchcock. He said he would not charge him 1 cent for the use of the Tides, but he had 4 conditions. Number 1, the actual name, Tides Restaurant, must be used in the film. Number 2, the name of the town in the movie was to be Bodega Bay. Number 3, the lead male character must have his name, Mitch. That's why Rod Taylor's name is Mitch Brennan. And 4th and final, he wanted a speaking part of the film. And this occurs after the very first bird attack with Melanie in the boat. When she goes across the boat, she leaves the lovebirds in the Brenner household. And then she's coming back, and as she's almost back at the pier, a gull comes and nips her right on the head. And after that occurs, on the dock, Mitch is standing there waiting for her to come into the dock, and Mitch Zankich is there on the dock, and he says, "Mitch, what happened, Mitch?" Now, besides Zankich's appearance, the staff also had some bit parts. Location filming in Sonoma County took 6 weeks, and Hitchcock and the crew became familiar sights around town. Here's Hitchcock on the Tides Pier. Here he is walking to the location where we're going to film, wherever that might be. And here are Bodega Bay residents watching the action on the set at the Tides, 1962. Now, in 1998, Hazel Mitchell, who had been a waitress at the Tides at the time of the filming, did an interview with the Press Democrat. She said, "I took the crew and Hitchcock in the banquet room at noontime. Hitchcock would never stay for dinner. He would go back to San Francisco, but Rod Taylor and Suzanne Plachette would stay, and Tippy Hedren. Hitchcock was very reserved, but he was always very pleasant. He ate the same thing every day. You know how precise he was with his pictures and all. Every day he would say, 'I'm going to have a piece of sole, my dear, about so big, and a cup of green beans and a few pieces of lettuce, and don't put anything else on the plate.'" And then she went on to say how one day she did make the bad mistake of putting a lemon wedge on the plate. No, didn't want a lemon wedge. Now, the Brenner house and barn adds to this. The Brenner house and barn, where Mitch and his family live, is first seen on Melanie's trip across the bay as she approaches the Brenner house. This is the trip that I started to show you on the DVD. And it's a white house and a red barn. The facade for them was constructed by the crew for the film. What was behind that facade of the house and barn was really the Gaffney Ranch. And I think we have to put the word ranch in quotation marks. You see from the state of it that it looks pretty run down. It's quite a mess. It was really just several broken down shacks that were owned by an elderly woman named Rose Gaffney. Now, locally, she was famous. And maybe some of you will remember this, because she led a successful grassroots movement that prevented PG&E from building a nuclear power plant on Bodega Head. Do you remember when that happened? I think it was in maybe late 70s or so. I think it was pretty soon. I moved here in 74, and I think it was not long after that. The local people who knew Rose Gaffney describe her as, quote, an old-fashioned pioneer woman, unquote. Hitchcock really, really liked her. He liked her because she had never heard of him, and she never went to the movies. So this is the Gaffney property at the time that it existed, when The Birds was, as it existed at the time The Birds was filmed in 1962. Now here is Hitchcock on the set in front of that facade that was built in front of the Gaffney Ranch. And of course there are birds around. And here is Hitchcock and the crew on the pier at the Brenner House. Now I want to go back to the DVD for a minute and think. Now, I think all I have to do is push play. We'll be able to see that facade, and this is it, in fact. That's what Melody's going toward, and it's hard to believe this is not a real place, isn't it? But this was built in front of those sticks that were called the Gaffney Ranch. And okay, so far so good. Now, why Bodega Bay? Why would he choose this area? Well, Hitchcock had grown very fond of the area when he was there in 1942, when he was filming Shadow of a Doubt. During that time, he took a day-long fishing trip with local dignitaries off the coast of Bodega Bay. The boat was rented from the Smith Brothers fishing fleet. And it must have really impressed him then, and he filed it away in his memory banks and came back to it 20 years later. In 1962, Hitchcock said to the Press-Democrat, "I chose Bodega Bay because it's small, intimate, isolated, and colorful. The sort of place made for this picture. The people are just right for the scenes I need. San Francisco's mudflats, the Monterey Peninsula, they wouldn't do it all." But there was a problem. Bodega Bay in 1962 consisted of a fishing pier, a motel, some houses, and a few other structures. And eventually what happened was that Bodega and Bodega Bay, along with locations in Bloomfield and Valley Forge, were combined into one town in the film. Now here I have a slide of Hitchcock's fictitious geography. How he combined all these various places into one spot. Cutting and pasting the town together, it shows us the power of editing. Melanie, when she first comes into town, that drive that I showed you in the clip before, she's driving south from Salmon Creek. No. Even I know that's not, my geography is not real good, but I know that's not right. And the children run screaming down the hill from the Potter School in Bodega to Dykeman's store, which is on Highway 1. Really, there are miles and miles between the two, the school and the store. But it doesn't look like that in the movie. I should tell you that Hitchcock at first tried putting magnets on the birds' feet. All the birds hung upside down. Wouldn't have appeared very threatening. Of course, this is the Potter Schoolhouse. But what I want you to see in this is how they run from that schoolhouse and they run right into the downtown area of Bodega Bay. So, yes, it's quite interesting how he can do that and make those two places seem so close together. But it's all through the miracle of editing, and he can do that. Now, this footage implies that the Tides building is just south of the center of town, the large fish market and the Bodega Bay General Store and Post Office. Really, there's no downtown located north of the Tides, no fish market building, no general store and post office. These were all filmed on the studio lot, but Hitchcock's creative geography at least remains consistent throughout the movie. Now today, almost all of these landmarks are gone. The gas station and general store that you see here were built for the movie. And here we have the interior of Brinkman's General Store. I'm sorry. The interior of Brinkman's General Store. This is the actor here, right? Who is in the store when Melanie goes in to try to find out where she can get a boat to go across the bay. And here, over on the other side, this is the interior of Dykeman's General Store with Mr. Dykeman standing in the front. And look at the similarities. The eyeglasses, the hair, the apron, the plaid shirt. I mean, Hitchcock was not spinning his wheels when he had all those photographs taken of every inhabitant in Bodega Bay. He was really paying close attention to that. So you can see that the two look very much alike, and this is because of Hitchcock's research into the area. He wanted the people to look real. Of course, Dykeman's store burned down. The original Tides has been renovated 2 times, I think, since 1962. The old Gaffney place on Bodega Head, does anyone know what that is now? It's the Bodega Marine Lab and Marine Reserve run by UC Davis. That's what that has been turned into. And Annie Hayworth's house, which you see in this photograph, if you look along the side, from this angle, it wasn't a house at all. It was a facade. Just there's no house, of course, if you drive to the Potter School now, there is no house there next to it, and there never was, as far as I know. So only the front of the house was built next to the school. And here is Hitchcock on that set, in front of that facade, when the Mitch Brenner character finds Annie Hayworth's body. That's the character played by Suzanne Plachette. He finds her body after the birds have killed her, and Hitchcock is giving them some detailed instructions, I'm sure, about what to do. Now, some filming sites remain pretty much the way they were in 1962. For example, here we have a distant view up here of the Fawcett Ranch. Now, Fawcett is the name of a friend of the Brenner family, a family that lived on this ranch called the Fawcett Ranch. And so this is as it appears in the film. And down here, this is the contemporary view of the Bianchi Ranch where it was filmed, and you see it doesn't look all that different from the way it looked in 1962. Here is a closer view, the Fawcett barn, and Lydia's truck. Lydia is Mitch's mother, played by Jessica Tandy. And here's the barn and the truck. And here on the bottom is a contemporary view of the Bianchi barn. And you can see not much has changed there. So, oh, and one more thing. The green John Deere tractor in the movie as it appears, and evidently still exists. I don't know if it works, but there it is. The only true landmark that remains untouched is the Potter Schoolhouse. Now this is a view up Bodega Lane of the children fleeing the schoolhouse. That's from the clip I just showed you. And then down here is a contemporary view looking up Bodega Lane toward the Potter Schoolhouse in Bodega. Now the schoolhouse was built in 1873 when Bodega was a thriving lumber town. 2 classrooms on the first floor and a multipurpose room upstairs with a piano and a stage. The area served school children for more than 90 years. In 1962, the building was sold by the county at public auction, and in 1966, the parents of the current owner, Leah Taylor, bought the property and renovated it. Part of the building was used as a family home. The other part at various times has been an art gallery, a restaurant, a bed and breakfast inn. Today, Leah Taylor still lives there with her husband and son. Unfortunately, she is no longer offering schoolhouse tours. I took that tour with a class I was teaching in Ollie in 2005, I believe. And I sent her email about a week ago, and I said, "Are you still operating tours?" And she said, "Oh, no, my husband and I are in business now, and we don't have any time to do that. And of course I remember when you came with your class, it was so much fun." So unfortunately, you cannot go into the schoolhouse anymore to tour it, but you can see how beautiful this old building still looks and enjoy that part of it. Now, official Sonoma County figures are this. The movie The Birds attracts to Sonoma County, attracts to Bodega Bay in Sonoma County every year over 100,000 tourists. Still, yes. And here is Hitchcock leading the cast and crew and swearing not to reveal the ending of the movie. Now this is ironic because at the time this picture was taken, the ending was not even known. So, of course they could swear with a clear conscience then. Well, what impresses me most about these two movies that Hitchcock made in Sonoma County is his committed use of the communities where he filmed, integrating the places into the films in such an important way, making the places essential to the stories, making Santa Rosa and then later the Sonoma Coast almost into characters in his films. It's clear that he loved this area that we all call home. His movies help us appreciate anew the fascinating beauty that surrounds us. And just so nobody gets too frustrated, I made 2 DVDs of Shadow of Doubt, one of the birds, and I'm going to leave these here, and I hope that you will share and enjoy them. And I did these from on-air play of the movies without commercials, so nothing illegal. And I want to leave these here for you to just pass around and put in if you have a video library at Oakmont. Maybe you do. And lastly, I just want to thank you so much for your attention this morning, and I want to open this up to any questions you might have, general questions about Hitchcock, or things you
I know we'll have a lot of questions this morning. Thank you very much, Alfred. Very, very entertaining and enlightening. But I want to ask a question. Why in every one of his movies we all have to intently watch to see his appearance? He's always within the first 5 minutes somewhere in the movie. I wonder what was his intent, his purpose in that.
Thank you. That's a very good question. Hitchcock was basically a very good marketer of himself. When he died in 1980, that was the date, when he died, almost every obituary I read started out the same way. Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense. And he really cultivated that image of himself. The cameos began when he was working in England on, I believe, his 3rd film, The Lodger, made in 1926, a silent film. And they just simply did not have enough people at the studio to fill in where they needed extras. And so he's sitting at a desk with his back to the camera, although it's hard to mistake him for anyone else because he was chubby then, although he did have more hair. And he's sitting with his back to the desk and he's working at the desk, and that's his cameo appearance. And people started talking about it, I think. And from time to time in Hitchcock, he would make appearances in some of his movies. In The Lady Vanishes, he doesn't appear till the very end of the film, when they finally get back from being trapped in the train. Hitchcock is there at the station, and he walks by puffing on a cigarette, I think, and just walks past. But I think he realized that people began to look for him in these little cameo appearances, and he realized that it would be a marketing device that he could use. And so he did. Now, he was not the most attractive man in the world. I don't know. I mean, I have horrors whenever anybody wants to show me a photo of myself. I hope they don't ask me to watch this videotape. But that's not part of it. No, I don't have to do that. Oh, I do. Oh, my. Oh, my. Well, no, but, you know, he put himself out there because it gathered attention for his movies. And in fact, you mentioned when you asked the question, you said something about him making his appearance early in the films. This was true in his later films. Frenzy, second to last film before Family Plot. I think it was released in 1976. The credits are rolling. This takes place in England. So the camera is this long, glorious tracking shot going down the Thames. And finally, the director's credit comes on, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and then the camera goes into the shore, and there's a political leader making a speech, and a big crowd of people, and Hitchcock is in that crowd. And he has a bowler hat on, so it's very easy to pick out. But here's what he said about making those cameo appearances. He said about the later movies, he said, I make my appearance right away in these later films because he said, everybody's looking for me and they're not paying attention to the story. So let's get it out of the way and then they can pay attention to the story. So he's, you know, but he was very conscious of what he marketed himself as. And I'm not sure that many of the things that he said about himself are even true. I mean, I don't know quite what to believe. I don't know whether it was part of his marketing campaign or... In fact, I think if he had proven to be adept at musicals, that would have been the genre that he went for, not suspense films. But he proved to be very adept at suspense films, and that's what made his name and reputation in England, and he continued on that when he came to America, of course. So he found the genre that he worked best in, and he milked it for all he could, and the cameos were part of that.
I had a question. Recently, Tippi Hedren had some rather uncomplimentary remarks about Alfred Hitchcock. Would you like to comment on that?
Oh, thank you, yes. And also, there's a movie coming out on HBO, the name of which is The Girl. And it is taken from the book Spellbound by Beauty, written by Donald Spoto. That book is about Hitchcock's fascination, for want of a better word, with his leading ladies, especially the blonde leading ladies. I have not seen the movie yet because it will not show on the air until October 20th. But I have read reviews of it. David Wygand, who writes for the Chronicle, has seen it. And he said, well, Sienna Miller plays Tippi, and she's good in the role. And Toby Jones plays Hitchcock, and he's good in the role. But the whole thing is so distasteful that it makes you want to take a shower, even if it means going to the Bates Motel. And that was the way he put it. So, I don't know. Now, what I have read, excuse me, what I have read about what transpired on the set of The Birds is enough to give me the willies. Hitchcock told Tippi that she would be working exclusively with mechanical or stuffed birds. He lied to her. The last one of the final scenes in the movie is when Melanie Daniels, the Tippi Hedren character, goes to the attic to find out what that noise is that she's hearing up there. And she goes up those stairs. I always ask myself that question. Why did Nancy Drew go up the hidden staircase? Why did she do that? Well, why did Tippi go up the stairs? Well, we know what's up there. We can hear the fluttering, you know. And she goes up the staircase and she goes into the room. And as she goes into the room, she looks up and she sees this big hole in the roof. And she sees some birds there. And she's so startled that she steps back in kind of shock and she closes the door on herself. And she's trapped in there with the birds. That scene took 1 week to shoot. It lasts 5 minutes or less on the screen. It took 1 week to shoot. There were live birds that were tied with fishing line to her costume, to her body, and she was told, I mean, until the morning she showed up, she believed there were only going to be birds that were not alive. So she had these live birds. One of them got her on the eyelid, could have taken her eye out very easily, and it took her 10 days in the hospital to recuperate. She said when she got there that day for shooting, she knew that Hitchcock had lied to her because she knew it must have taken a very long time to get this set up. So she felt very distrustful. And later, he said something to her which was not really an apology for doing that. But she said, she thought, I can't remember his exact words, but she said she thought it was the closest she was going to come to getting an apology. And he asked her to be in the movie Marnie, and that's when their relationship really went sour. She accepted that role, and it's a wonderful movie. In fact, Marnie is the film that I did my thesis on at San Francisco State to get my master's. And it's a wonderful film, and very sharp and very good. But he did not treat her real well on that, because he wanted to control her private life as well as her professional life. He wanted to tell her what to wear, who to date, etc. And so she was not happy about that and resisted. And I understand the reason that this movie that has been made for HBO is called The Girl is because after a certain point in the making of Marnie, Hitchcock would not say her name. That's the way he referred to her. He would say, the girl this or the girl that. He could not even say her name. Whether this was some kind of rejection because of her rejection of him, I mean, we don't know what really happened. I have heard Diane Baker, who worked on Marnie with Hitchcock and Hedren, I have heard her talk about what happened to her. She said one day she was in her dressing room, and evidently the shooting was over for the day. And I think Diane Baker now teaches at a small San Francisco college. She teaches acting classes. Anyway, she's really, she's been in hundreds of movies. But she said one day she was in her dressing room after shooting was done, and Hitchcock came into the dressing room, and there were a couple of words exchanged, and he kissed her full on the mouth. And she let him know that that was not appropriate, and it was never spoken of again. So, who knows? But, I mean, it's good to think that, I think the best thing we can take out of this is that Hitchcock was very frustrated as an unattractive man and let a lot of this out in his movies, which we can be grateful for, but the way he treated the actresses sometimes was not good. But,
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question about the church behind the school. In my recollection, that the church was part of the movie, but you said that
The birds?
The birds, yeah. That there was a scene at the church, which is right behind the school. Wasn't that in the movie?
I don't think there's a scene in the church.
Okay,
I
that's
cannot-
the door of the church, I thought.
Oh, well, that was just the schoolhouse door.
That was just the schoolhouse door?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, because
Yeah.
for some reason I thought it was a church.
No,
But there is a church behind the building. And-
is there? Okay.
Yeah, and I was just, next to the building, and I just
Okay.
wondered whether that was there at the time. It looks like it was.
Yeah, I think it must have been.
So,
But I-
okay.
Yes. Get your exercise, Virginia.
Hi. So we know that there was no CGI back in those days.
Oh,
So how did he manage all those birds? And
indeed.
yeah, how did he pull off those scenes?
Yeah. Well, what they used What they used to do those, and I did bring some notes about that, I had a feeling I might be asked. That was the most difficult technical problem, was dealing with the birds. And of course, there were no computers then. The blue screen process was perfected in 1958, but it was disturbing because it gave this little sign of like fringing around the outside of the form, and just did not measure up as far as Hitchcock was concerned. What they used in the film is a sodium matte process, a method of combining in an optical printer backgrounds and foregrounds that are shot at different times. Now the matte is like a silhouette that distinguishes between the foreground and the background. The background's illuminated by a yellow sodium light. In the foreground, the actor is illuminated by a white light, and then a special camera is used with 2 pieces of film in it, one sensitive only to sodium light, one sensitive only to white light, and those are combined. This sodium process was perfected by Disney, and in fact, Ub Iwerks gets special credit in the birds for his contribution to that process. Initially, they tried mechanical birds that move. That did not work out well at all. And as I said, the schoolhouse scene, they attached magnets to the feet of the birds. The theory was that the birds would stick to the metal gutter, but they all went claws up, fell and hung upside down. Now, Ray Berwick was the head bird trainer. He and the team trained birds, but they also had fake birds that were stuffed and interspersed with live birds, because Hitchcock said your eye goes to movement, and because some of them were moving, the illusion is that all of them are moving, and it works very well. The real birds, some of them had their beaks wired shut. Seagulls could be trained to go for food. Meat was even put on the camera lens to get them to imagine being a camera operator. Now, crows are very intelligent birds and they're hard to capture, so the film company went into the egg production business, growing crows for the movie. In the attic scene, real birds were used after Tippy had been promised all fake birds, and some of the birds, in addition to being wired to her clothing, some of the birds were thrown at her. And certainly, we have to think, if you are at all familiar with that attic scene, we have to think about the parallels with the shower scene in Psycho, when Marion Crane is murdered. Because in both cases, the guilty woman is attacked mercilessly by some unknown force, and the punishment is very disproportionate to the crime. So, and a lot of trick shots, 371 trick shots altogether in the movie, including the most difficult trick shot was the last shot of the film. Now you know there's no "the end" on the birds. Those words do not appear on the screen. That last shot is an important shot because it's not a real ending. The birds have taken over the screen, the birds have taken over the world, and it was 32 pieces of film combined into one shot. Wow. During filming, literally thousands of birds were used. The SPCA was on the set a lot, and there was an aviary on the set caring for injured birds, and special care was taken that any birds that had their beaks wired shut did not escape, because then, of course, they would have died, not been able to eat. And the actors were given lots of tetanus shots. So that's what happened with birds. Yes?
Barbara, thank you so much for such a great presentation. Thank you, Barbara.